Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 94th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the old woman Zat al-Dawai and those with her had agreed upon such words, she said, Now as soon as that which I impart shall reach the ears of King Sharrkan, say him further. Hearing these words from that image, we knew that the holy man was indeed of the chiefest devotees and Allah's servants of purest quality. So we made 3 days full march till we came in sight of that hermitage, and then we went up to it, and passed the day in buying and selling as is wont of merchants. As soon as day had departed our sight, and night was come to darken light, we repaired to the cell wherein was the dungeon, and we heard the holy man, after chanting some verses of the Koran, repeat the following couplets. My heart disheartened is, my breast is trait, and sinks my soul in the sea of bale and bait. Unless escape be near, I soon shall die, and death were better than this doleful strait. O lightning, and thou light my home and folk, and their still brighter charms thy shine abate. Say what my path to meet them being barred by wars and barricaded succor's gate. When once you have brought me into the Moslem camp, and I am mixed with them, you shall see. The old woman continued, How I will make shift to beguile them, and slay them all, even to the last man. The Nazarenes, hearing what she said, kissed her hands and set her in the chest, after they had beaten her with a grievous beating in obedience to her commands, for they saw it was incumbent on them to do her bidding in this. Then all were made for the Moslem's host, as hath erst been said. Such was the case with the damned hag Zat al-Dawai and her companions, but as regards the Mohammedan army, they indeed, after Allah had given them victory over their enemies, and they had plundered everything in the ships of money and hoards, all sat down to converse with one another, and Zau al-Makan said to his brother Sharrkan, Verily, Allah hath granted us to prevail because of our just dealing and discipline and concord amongst ourselves. Wherefore continue, O Sharrkan, to obey my commandment in submission to Allah, be he exalted and extolled. For I mean to slay 10 kings in blood revenge for my sire, to cut the throat of 50,000 Greeks, and to enter Constantinople. Replied Sharrkan, My life be thy ransom against death. Needs must I follow out the holy war, though I won many a year in their country. But I have, O my brother, in Damascus a daughter named Kuzia Fakan, whom I love heartily, for she is one of the marvels of the time, and she will soon be of age. Said Zau al-Makan, And I also have left my wife with child, and near her time, nor do I know what Allah will vouchsafe me by her. But promise me, O my brother, that if Allah bless me with a son, thou wilt grant me thy daughter for wife to him, and make covenant with me, and pledge me thy faith thereon. With love and goodwill, replied Sharrkan, and stretching out his hand to his brother, he said, If she bring thee a son, I will give him my daughter, Kuzia Fakan, to wife. At this, Zau al-Makan rejoiced, and they fell to congratulating each other on the victory over the enemy. And Wazir Dandan also congratulated the two brothers, and said to them, Know, O ye kings, that Allah hath given us the victory, for that we have devoted our lives to him, be he exalted and extolled. And we have left our homes and households, and it is my counsel that we follow up the foe, and press upon him, and harass him, so happily Allah shall enable us to win our wishes, and we shall destroy our enemies, branch and root. If it please you, do you go down into the ships, and sail over the sea, whilst we fare forward by land, and bear the brunt of the battle and the thrust of fight. And the minister Dandan ceased not to urge them to combat, and repeated his words, who said, To slay my foes is chiefest bliss I wist, and on the courser's back be borne a list, comes promising tierce, a messenger from friend, full oft when comes the friend without tierce. And these words of another, War for my mother, and I live. I'll take spear for my brother, scimitar for my sire, with every shag-haired brave who meets his death, smiling till one from doom has dear desire. And when the wazir ended his verses, he said, Praise be to him who aided us dear victory to uphold, and who hath given us spoil of silver and fine gold. Then Zau al-Makan commanded the army to depart, and they fared on, forcing their marches for Constantinople, till they came to a wide and spacious campaign, full of all things fair and fain, with wild cattle frisking and gazelles pacing to and fro across the plain. Now they had traversed great deserts, and drink had been 6 days cut off from them, when they drew near this meadow and saw therein water founting and ripe fruits flaunting, and that land, as it were, was paradise, for it had donned its adornments and decked itself. Gently waved the branches of its trees, drunken with the new wine of the dew, and combined with the nectar of Tasnim, the soft breathings of morning breeze. Ah, mind and gazer were confounded by its beauty, even as saith the poet, Behold, this lovely garden 'tis as though spring o'er its frame were greeny gloak had spread. Looking with fleshy eyne, thou shalt be sight, a lake whose waters balance in their bed. But look with spirit eyes, and lo shalt see glory, and every leaf o'erwaves thy head. And as another saith, the stream's cheek by sunlight rosy dyed, whose down is creeping shade of tamarisk stems, round legs of tree trunks, wavelets roll in rings, silvern and blossoms are thy diadems. When Zau al-Makan saw this champaign, with its trees bowing and its flowers blooming and its birds warbling, he called to his brother Sharrkan and said, O my brother, verily in Damascus is not the like of this place. We will not march from it till after 3 days, that we may take rest ourselves, and that our army of all Islam may regain strength, and their souls be fortified to encounter the blamed infidels. So they halted therein, and while camping, behold, they heard a noise of voices from afar. And Zau al-Makan asked the cause thereof, and was answered that a caravan of merchants from the land of Syria had halted there to rest, and that the Moslem troops had come on them and had happily seized something of the goods while they had brought from the country of the infidels. After a while up came the merchants, crying out and appealing to the king for aidance. When Zau al-Makan saw this, he braved them before him. When in presence they said to him, O king, we have been in the country of the infidels, and they plundered us of nothing. Why then do our brothers the Moslems despoil our goods, and we in their own land? Of a truth, when we saw your troops, we went up to them, and they robbed us of what we had with us, and we have now reported to thee all that hath befallen us. Thereupon they brought out to them the letter of the king of Constantinople, and Sharrkan read it and said, We will presently restore to you what hath been taken from you, but yet it behoveth you not to carry merchandise to the country of the infidels. Replied they, O our lord, in very sooth Allah dispatched us thither that we might win what Gaza never won like the other, not even all thou and all thy razzias. Asked Sharrkan, What was it she won? O king, answered they, we will not tell thee save in private, for if this matter be noised among the folk, haply it may come to the ears of some, and this will be the cause of our ruin, and of the ruin of all Moslems who resort to the land of the Greeks. Now they had hidden the chest wherein was the damsel Zat al-Dawai. So Zau al-Makan and his brother brought them to a private place, where they laid bare to both of them the story of the devotee, and wept till they made the 2 kings weep. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 95th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Nazarenes who wore merchants' weed, when brought to a private place by Zau al-Makan and his brother Sharrkan, laid bare to both of them the story of the devotee, and wept till they made the 2 kings weep, and repeated to them all which had been taught to them by the old witch Zat al-Dawai. Thereupon Sharrkan's heart yearned to the devotee, and he was moved to ruth for him, and was fired with zeal for the service of Almighty Allah. So quoth he to them, Did you rescue this holy man, or is he still in the hermitage? Quoth they, We delivered him, and slew the hermit, fearing for our lives, after which we made haste to fly for dread of death. But a trusty man told us that in his hermitage are quintals of gold and silver, and stones of price. Then they fetched the chest, and brought out the accursed old woman, as she were a cassia pod, for excess of blackness and leanness, and she was laden with the same fetters and shackles. When Zau al-Makan and the bystanders saw her, they took her for a man, and of the best of Allah's devotees in surpassing and pious qualities, more especially because of the shining of her forehead, for the ointment wherewith she had anointed her face. So Zau al-Makan and Sharrkan wept sore. Then they rose up at honor and kissed her hands and feet, sobbing aloud. But she signed to them and said, Cease this weeping and hear my words. Hereat they dried their tears in obedience to her bidding. And she said, Know ye both that I was content to accept what my Lord did unto me, for I keened that the affliction which befell me was a trial from him, be he exalted and extolled. And whoso hath not patience under calamity and tribulation, for him there is no coming to the delights of paradise. I had indeed supplicated him that I might return to my native land, not as a compensation for the sufferings decreed to me, but that I might die under the horse hoofs of warriors fighting for the faith, who being slain in fray live again without suffering death. Then she repeated the following couplets. Our fort is tore, and flames the fire of fight. Moses art thou, and this is time for aid. Cast down thy rod, 'twill swallow all thy rot, nor dread for men their ropers by vipers made. For chapters read on fight day lines of foes, and on their necks grave verses with thy blade. When the old woman had ended her verse, her eyes overflowed with tears, and her forehead under the unguent shone like gleaming light. And Sharrkan rose and kissed her hand, and caused food to be brought before her. But she refused it, saying, I have not broken my fast by day for 15 years, and how should I break it at such a time when my Lord hath been bountiful to me in delivering me from the captivity of the infidels, and removing me from which was more grievous to me than torment of fire? I will wait till sundown. So, when it was nightfall, Sharrkan and Zau al-Makan came and served her with food and said, Eat, O ascetic. But she said, There is no time for eating. It is the time for worshipping the requiting king. Then she stood up in the prayer niche and remained praying till the night was spent, and she ceased not to do after this fashion for 3 days and nights, sitting not but at the time of salam and salutation, ending the several prayers. When Zau al-Makan saw her on this wise, firm belief in her gat hold of his heart, and he said to Sharrkan, Cause a tent of perfumed leather to be pitched for this religious, and appoint a body servant to wait upon him. On the 4th day she called for food. So they brought her all kinds of meats, that she could seduce the sense of delight and the sight. But all of this she would eat only a scone with salt. Then she again turned to her fast, and as the night came, she rose anew to pray. When Sharrkan said to Zau al-Makan, Verily, this man carrieth renunciation of the world to the extreme of renouncing, and were it not for this holy war, I would join him myself, and worship Allah in his service, till I came before his presence. And now I desire to enter his tent, and talk with him for an hour. Quoth Zau al-Makan, And I also. Tomorrow we sally forth to fight against Constantinople, and we shall find no time like the present. Said the Wazir Dandan, And I no less desire to see the ascetic. Happily he will pray for me, and I find death in this holy war, and come to the presence of my Lord, for I am weary of this world. So as soon as night had darkened, they repaired to the tent of that witch Zat al-Dawai, and seeing her standing to pray, they drew near her and fell a-weeping for pity of her. But she paid no heed to them till midnight was past, when they ended her orisons by pronouncing the salutation. Then she turned to them after wishing them long life, and asked them, Wherefore come ye? Whereto they answered, O thou holy man, Didst thou not hear us weep around thee? She rejoined, To him who standeth in the presence of Allah remaineth no existence in time, either for hearing any or seeing aught about him. Quoth they, We would have thee recount to us the cause of thy captivity, and pray for us this night, for that will profit us more than the possessions of Constantinople. Now, when she heard these words, she said, By Allah, were ye not the emirs of the Moslems, I would not relate to you aught of this at any time, for I complain not but to Allah alone. However, to you, I will relate the circumstances of my captivity. Know then that I was in the saintly city of Jerusalem, with certain ecstatics and inspired men, and did not magnify myself among them, for that Allah, be he exalted and extolled, had endowed me with humility and abnegation, till I chanced to go down to the sea one night, and walked upon the water. Then entered into me pride, whence I know not, and I said to myself, Who like me can walk the water? And my heart from that time hardened, and Allah afflicted me with the love of travel. So I journeyed to Roomland, and visited every part of the whole year, and left no place but therein I worshipped Allah. When I came to this spot, I clomb the mountain, and saw there an hermitage inhabited by a monk called Matrahuna, who, he sighted me, came out and kissed my hands and feet, and said, Verily, I have seen thee since thou enterest the land of the Greeks, and thou hast filled me with longing for the land of al-Islam. Then he took my hand, and carried me into the hermitage, and brought me to a dark room. And when I entered it unawares, he locked the door on me, and left me there 40 days without meat or drink, for it was his intent to kill me by delay. It chanced one day that a knight called Dacius came to the hermitage, accompanied by 10 squires and his daughter Thomasil, a girl whose beauty was incomparable. When they entered the hermitage, the monk Matrahina told them of me, and the knight said, Bring him out, for surely there is not on him a bird's meal of meat. So they opened the door of the dark room, and found me standing in the niche, praying and reciting the Koran, and glorifying Allah, and humbling myself before the Almighty. When they saw me in this state, Matrahina explained, This man is indeed a sorcerer of the sorcerers. And hearing his words, they all came in on me, Dacianus and his company withal, and they beat me with a grievous beating, till I desired death, and reproached myself, saying, This is his reward, who exalted himself, and who prideth himself on that which Allah hath vouchsafed on him, beyond his own competence. And thou, O my soul, verily self-esteem and arrogance have crept into thee. Dost thou not know that pride angereth the Lord, and hardeneth the heart, and bringeth men to the fire? Then they laid me in fetters, and returned me to my place, which was the dungeon underground. Every 3 days they threw me down a scone of barley bread and a draught of water. And every month or 2 the knight came to the hermitage. Now his daughter Thomasil had grown up, for she was 9 years old when I first saw her, and 15 years passed over me in captivity, so that now she had reached her 24th year. There is not in our land, nor in the land of the Greeks, a fairer than she. And her father feared lest the king rode with Dacianus in the habitat of a cavalier, so that albeit none might compare her with her loveliness, and no one who saw her knew her for a woman. And her father had laid up his monies in this hermitage, every one who aught of price of treasured hoard, being wont to deposit it therein. And I saw there all manner of gold and silver and jewels and precious vessels and rarities. None may keep count of them save Allah Almighty. Now ye are worthier of these riches than those infidels. So lay hands on that which is in the hermitage, and divide it among the Moslems, and especially on fighters in the holy war. When these merchants came to Constantinople and sold their merchandise, that image which is on the wall spoke to them, by grace of a marvel which Allah granted to me, so that they made for the hermitage, and slew Matrahina, after torturing him with most grievous torments, and dragging him by the beard till he showed them the place where I was. when they took me, and found no path but flight for dread of death. Now, tomorrow night Tamasil will visit that hermitage, as is her habit, and her father and his squires will come after her. As he feareth for her, so he would witness these things. Take me with you, and I will deliver to you the monies and the riches of the knight Decanus, which be in the mountain. For I saw them bring out vessels of gold and silver, to drink therefrom, and I heard the damsel of their company sing to them in Arabic, and well away. Oh, that so sweet a voice should not be busied in chanting the Koran. If there ye will, enter into that hermitage, and hide there against the coming of Decanus and his daughter, and take her, for she is fit only for the king of the age, Sharrkan, or King Zau-al-Makan. Thereat they all rejoiced, with the exception of the Wazir Dandan, who put scant faith in her story, for her words took no hold on his reason, and signs of doubt in her and disbelief showed in his face. Yet he was confounded at her discourse, but he feared to speak with her for awe of the king. Then quoth the ancient dame Zat al-Dawai, Verily, I fear lest the night come, and seeing these troops encamped in the meadow, he be afraid to enter the hermitage. So Zau-al-Makan ordered the army to march upon Constantinople, and I said, I resolve to take with me 100 horses and many mules, and make for the mountains, where we will load the beasts with the monies which be in the hermitage. Then I sent at once for the chief chamberlain, whom they brought into the presence, and he summoned likewise the leaders of the Turks and the Damalites, and said, As soon as it is dawn, do ye set forth for Constantinople, and thou, O chamberlain, shalt take my place in council and contrivance while there. O Rustam shalt be my brother's deputy in battle. But let none that know where we are until after 3 days, when we will rejoin you. Then he chose out of 100 of the doughtiest riders, and he and Sharrkan and the minister Dandan set out for the hermitage, and the 100 horsemen led the mules with chests for transporting the treasures. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased her permitted say. Now, when it was the 96th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Sharrkan and his brother Zau-al-Makan and the Wazir Dandan set off with 100 horses for the hermitage described to them by that accursed Zat al-Dawai, and they took with them mules and chests for transporting the treasure. Now, as soon as dawned the morn, the chamberlain signaled to the host an order for departure, and they set out thinking that the 2 kings and the Wazir were with them, knowing not that the 3 had made for the monastery. Such was the case with the host, but as regards the 2 kings and the minister, they tarried at their place till the end of the day. Now, the infidels who were with Zat al-Dawai took their departure privily after they had gone into her, and kissed her hands and feet, and obtained her leave to march. So she not only gave them permission, but also taught them all she minded of wile and guile. And when it was dark night, she arose and went into Zau-al-Makan and his companions, and said to them, Come, let us set out for the mountain, and take with you a few men at arms. They obeyed her, and left 5 horsemen at the foot of the mountains, while the rest rode on before Zat al-Dawai, who gained new strength for excess of joy, so that Zau-al-Makan said, Glory be to him who sustaineth this holy man, whose like we never saw. Now, the witch had written a letter to the king of Constantinople, and dispatched it on the wings of a bird, acquainting him with what had passed in ending. I wish thee to send me 10,000 horsemen of the bravest of the Greeks, and let them steal along the foot of the mountains with caution, lest the host of all Islam get sight of them. And when they reach the hermitage, let them ambush themselves there till I come to them with the Moslem king and his brother. For I shall inveigle them, and I will bring them thither, together with the Wazir, and 100 horse, and no more, that I may presently deliver to them the crosses which be in the hermitage. I am resolved to slay the monk Matrahina, since my scheme cannot be carried out but by taking his life. If my plot works well, not one of the Moslems shall return to his own country. No, not a living weight, nor any one who blows the fire alight. and Matrahina shall be a sacrifice for the followers of the Nazarene faith, and the servants of the cross, and praise be to the Messiah first and last." When this letter reached Constantinople, the keeper of the carrier pigeons carried it to King Alfredon, who read it, and forthwith inspected his hosts, and equipped 10,000 cavaliers with horses and dromedaries and mules and provant, and bade them repair to that hermitage, and after reaching the tower to hide therein. Thus far concerning them. But as regards King Zal-Makan and his brother Sharrkan and the Wazir Dandan and the escort, when they reached the hermitage, they entered and met the monk Matrahina, who came out to see who and what they were. Whereupon quoth the pious man Zat al-Dawai, "Slay that damn fool!" So they smote him with their swords, and made him drink the cup of death. Then the accursed old woman carried them to a place of offerings, an ex-votos, and brought out to them treasures and precious things more than she had described to them. And after gathering the whole together, they set the booty in chests, and loaded the mules therewith. As for Tamasil, she came not, she or her father, for fear of the Moslems. So Zal-Makan tarried there, awaiting her all that day and the next, and a third, till Sharrkan said to him, "By Allah, I am troubled anent the army of al-Islam, for I know not what has become of them." His brother replied, "I also am concerned for them, and we've come by this great treasure, and I do not believe that Tamasil or any one else will approach the hermitage after that befell, which hath befallen the host of the Christians. It behoveth us, then, to content ourselves with what Allah hath given us, and depart. So happily he will help us conquer Constantinople." Accordingly, they came down from the mountains, while Zat al-Dawai was impotent to oppose their march for fear of betraying her deceit, and they fared forwards till they reached the head of a defile, where the old woman had laid an ambush for them with 10,000 horse. As soon as they saw the Moslems, they encircled them from all sides, couching lance and bearing the white saber blade, and the infidels shouted the watchword of their faithless faith, and set the shafts of their mischief astring. When Zal-Makan and his brother Sharrkan and the minister Dandan looked upon this host, they saw that it was a numerous army, and said, "Who could have given these troops information of us?" Replied Sharrkan, "O my brother, this being no time for talk, this is the time for smiting with swords and shooting with shafts. So gird up your courage and hearten your hearts, for this strait is like a street with two gates, though by the virtue of the Lord of Arabs and Ajams, were not the place so narrow, I would bring them to naught, even though they were 100,000 men." So Zal-Makan said, "Had we wot this, we would have brought us 5,000 horse." And the Wazir Dandan continued, "If we had 10,000 horse, they had availed us naught in these narrows. But Allah will succor us against them. I know this defile and its straightness, and I know there be many places of refuge in it. For I have been here on razzia with King Omar bin al-Nu-uman. What will he besiege Constantinople? We abode in this place, and here is water colder than snow. So come, let us push out of this defile ere the infidel host increase on us, and get the start of us to the mountain top, whence they will hurl down rocks upon us, and we powerless to come up at them." So they began hurrying on to get out of those narrows, but the pious man Zat al-Dawai looked at them and said, "What is it ye fear, ye who have vowed yourself to the Lord and to the working his will? By Allah, I abode imprisoned underground for 15 years, yet never gainsaying the Almighty aught he did with me. Fight ye in Allah's way. So whoever of you is slain, paradise shall be his abode, and whoso slayeth, striving shall be his honor." When they heard from the ascetic these words, their care and anxiety ceased from them, and they stood firm till the infidels charged down from all sides, whilst the swords played upon their necks, and the cup of death went round amongst them. The Moslems fought for the service of Allah, a right good fight, and wrought upon his foes with a sway of sword and a lunge of lance, while Zal-Makan smote upon the men, and guard the knights bite the dust, and their heads from their bodies take flight 5 by 5 and 10 by 10, till he had done a death a number of them past numbering, and a comped beyond counting. Now, while doing so, he looked at the accursed old woman, who was waving her sword and heartening them, and all who feared fled to her for shelter. But she was also signing the infidels to slay Sharrkan. So troop after troop rushed on him with design to do him die. But each troop that charged, he charged and drove them back. And when another troop attacked, he repelled the assault with the sword in their backs. For he thought it was the devotees' blessings that gave him the victory. And he said in himself, Verily, on this holy man, Allah looketh with eyes of his favor, and strengtheneth my prowess against the infidels with the purity of his pious intent. For I see that they fear me, and cannot prevail against me, but every one who assaileth me turneth tail and taketh flight. So they battled the rest of the day. And when night fell, the Moslems took refuge in a cage of that defile, being weary with stress of war and cast of stone. And that day were slain of them 45. And when they were gathered together, they sought the devotee, but could find no trace of him. And this was grievous to them. And they said, Belike he hath died a martyr. Quoth Sharrkan, I saw him heartening the horsemen with divine instances, and using as talisman verses of holy writ. Now while they were talking, behold, the accursed old woman Zat al-Dawai stood before them, hending in hand the head of the chief captain of the 10,000 horse, a noble knight, a champion fierce in fight, and a Satan for blight. One of the Turks had slain him with an arrow, and Allah hurried his soul to the fire. And when the infidels saw what the Moslem had done with their leader, they all fell on him and wrought his bane, and hewed him in pieces with their swords, and Allah hurried his soul to heaven. Then the accursed old woman cut off that knight's head, and brought it and threw it at the feet of Sharrkan and Zal-al-Makan and Wazir Dandan. Now when Sharrkan saw her, he sprung up hastily before her and exclaimed, Praise be Allah for thy safety and for our sighting thee, O holy man and devout champion of the religion. Replied she, O my son, I have sought martyrdom this day, and have thrown my life away amid the infidel array, but they feared me with dismay. When ye dispersed, I waxed jealous for your honor. So I rushed on the chief knight, their leader, albeit he was a match for 1,000 horse, and I smote him till I severed head from trunk. Not one of the infidels could near me, so I brought his head to you. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my tale for this day, till it be morrow.